Welcome to the #CNF podcast, episode 10. I'm your host, Brendan O'Mara. Today's guest is Joe DePaulo, freelance features writer and sports writer, whose work has appeared in the New York Times, Boston Globe Magazine, and SB Nation Longform. And part of what's really cool about this podcast, humble as it is that I get to, in some small way, promote people's work I admire. And I just get to talk shop, as I hope you've grown to like so far in the limited showings of this podcast. This one's pretty great in that we get to sort of dive into his process. We kind of talk about some of the works that have inspired Joe and also me, talk shop, and we also just share a lot of his insights into his own working process, which is applicable to anybody, veteran or rookie. So let's count it down in Spanish. 3, 2, 1, podcasto.
Hello.
Hey, is this Joe?
Hey, Brendan, what's happening, man?
Thanks very much for being on the podcast again. I'll start things off by just asking you what brought you to Fort Lauderdale. I imagine it's the story you're working on right now.
Yeah, I've spent a good bit of time with the heavyweight boxing champion Vladimir Klitschko over the past couple of months, and it started in February when he came up to New York for a press conference announcing his bout at Madison Square Garden on April 25th against American contender Brian Jennings, and spent a couple days with him, at a number of events during that period, and then the trip down to Fort Lauderdale was to go see him at his training camp. So I was there. I spent 3 days there, and very, very fascinating guy, very expansive in interviews, very smart guy, holds a PhD in sports science from Kiev University, as it's informally known, the national university in Ukraine. He's just a learned man, a very engaging subject, a very affable guy, which I hadn't guessed. If you're a follower of boxing, that sometimes both he and his brother Vitaly, who's by the way the mayor of Kiev, both have come off, in terms of boxing style, at times as a little mechanical and wooden, but, Vladimir Klitschko's really an engaging personality when you spend some time with him in a room, and really fascinating guy. So I'm working on a profile of him. It'll run sometime next week, and we're looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a very interesting piece. We'll get into some of the situation in Ukraine. Obviously, the conflict has devastated the nation over there, and Vladimir Klitschko opened up quite a bit about what he'd seen, during his trips over there, and what his brother has had to deal with as mayor of the capital city. A lot of ground was covered. He's a new father. He's engaged to Hayden Panettiere of television's Nashville. And they make quite the optics of that couple, Brendan, are quite interesting because he's 6'6" and she's, I believe, 4'11".
Wow.
So yeah, it's a photographically unique celebrity pairing, but it appears to be a happy one from the outside, and Miss Panettiere just recently gave birth to the couple's first child, a daughter named Kaya. And so just a really interesting guy, and we'll try to bring him to life here and introduce him to a new side of this man. Coming up next week, it's his first fight in the United States in 8 years. So it's, for a lot of people, they'll just be getting reacquainted with this guy. But looking forward to having that one out there.
So what is your particular draw to boxing? You've written a lot about it, and some very high-profile boxers like Pacquiao and Mayweather. And I wonder, what is the draw for? What draws you to it, and what do you find interesting enough that you're able to write about it with the authority that you do?
I love the vulnerability of the subject. I mean, you're there. You're in the ring. And it's. You might have read Joyce Carol Oates on the subject too, Brendan. I mean, it's funny, that boxing does seem to have an appeal to writers. I think the characters are very honest. I think there's a candor in boxers and trainers and people around that sport that you don't find in many sports these days. Partially because I think it's out of necessity, that boxing has taken a dive in popularity, in the mainstream, and so they haven't been boxers haven't been, with a few notable exceptions like Floyd Mayweather, haven't been as carefully managed, as micromanaged as a lot of mainstream athletes today. So you can actually get these guys to sit down and talk with you candidly and in a way that athletes in many other sports don't. And to go back to that vulnerability, I mean, it's two men in the ring. I mean, it's really it is character revealing, I believe, in a way that some other sports maybe aren't as much. I think consider football, for instance, where the players are in helmets and a lot of times they are faceless entities, faceless beings, serving this great entity, the NFL. Comparing the two gladiator sports, I think you get much more of an idea of a person's character in the boxing ring, and seeing what they do and seeing how they conduct themselves in and out of the ring. So I like it as a subject a lot. I think that it really is a great venue for writing.
Yeah, just like you said with the vulnerability, they are quite literally stripped down, right down to their trunks and gloves. So it's like everything is out there for you to see. And do you find that their personalities come through in their fighting style?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. To speak of Mayweather here, in advance of the big fight in a couple of weeks. There's a guy whose ring style, to a degree, you could certainly argue mirrors, his, out of the ring persona in terms of, the ability to just, in terms of, maybe a nomadic tendency that he has in the ring. He doesn't stand in one spot. He's hard to pin down in the ring, and he's hard to pin down out of the ring. He's just very, very evasive. He's a hard guy to get a handle on. About his, he's an exception certainly to what I was talking about with the, carefully constructed persona, and he's a hard guy to get a handle of, and so I think his fighting style kind of does mirror his out of the ring persona, and I think that can be whereas Manny Pacquiao is straightforward, straight ahead, direct kind of person, and you're going to see that play out on May 2nd. I think both fighters employing those strategies, and to a degree, I think they mirror their personas out of the ring. I think that's a pretty astute observation. It doesn't hold always. I mean, at the top of my head, I mean, Even Klitschko is a good example of this, actually, because he is a very analytical person. A really he is really very scientific in his approach. In and out of the ring, out of the ring, he applies the same principles kind of that he does inside, where he just kind of uses in the ring. He uses his jab to kind of break opponents down, and knows exactly when to go in, and is very measured and cautious in his approach, and at times that has maybe cost him some fans, but that's just the way he is, and that's how he fights. So I would say not in every case, but there are plenty of cases where in-ring performance and out-of-the-ring behavior are kind of very close to each other.
And backing up a bit now, way back, where did you grow up?
I grew up in. I've lived basically my whole life in a 5-mile radius in northeast Queens, in New York, and grew up in a co-op in a nice little community called Little Neck. And from there, moved around a couple of times. Then I've landed now in Bayside, which is about not even 5 miles away. Mm-hmm. So I've lived a pretty sheltered life, which is no way to go about it for a writer. But thankfully, I've done a bit of traveling, and that has helped me gain some perspective. But yeah, I grew up in Queens guy, born and raised.
And so when you were in high school and everything, what was there a footprint at that time that led you down this road into sports journalism and some narrative journalism?
Yes and no. Like I had started writing from a very young age. I wrote this terrible fiction. Mm-hmm.
We all have some of those.
When I was growing up, even before high school, I'm like 10, 11 years old, and my family used to have one of the old Commodore printers, mm-hmm. And you had to print out with the holes on the side of the paper, that old paper.
Oh yeah, and the dot matrix type.
Yeah, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Oh yeah, like the dot matrix printers and.
Exactly. Yeah, it was one of those old. It's like an hour to print a page kind of thing, and I had this 55-page novella, and I would print it out, and if there was one mistake or one revision, I would take it upon myself to reprint the entire thing. Now, I don't know why I did that, but I did that, and so, yeah, I was, and meanwhile, of course, there were a gazillion mistakes, and I would cringe if a copy of this ever surfaced, but yeah, so I did that in my very early years. I've always read and liked narrative sports journalism, so there was that. But really, for a while, I was kind of thinking about, and I eventually did, a bit of radio. That was my first foray in the communications industry. So really, if you had pinned me down, you talk about high school, if you had pinned me down in those years, I probably would have said that my dream job was either working on or doing a radio show of some point, of some sort. I think that was it for me. So I had a toe in the water for writing, but the love of the medium that I have now didn't develop until later for me.
Okay. And who were some of those writers that you were reading that informed a lot of the work you're doing today?
Well, I mean, I've obviously, collected those best American sports writing books, which are curated by editor now at SB Nation, Glenn Stout, and in those you get a treasure trove of stuff, and it's funny, here in New York you have a lot of prominent sports columnists, but I was never really a big fan of the columnist per se. You have Mike Lupica, you have some of the other people that have done good column writing. And not at all as a criticism of their work, but that's just not the type of writing I was drawn to. I was drawn to the more narrative style that was employed in these West American sports writing books, and so for me, you had people like Richard Ben Kramer. Mm-hmm. Was one that jumps off the page for me. You had as one example. His Ted Williams profile was from Esquire was really just about as good as it gets. Even though he was a columnist, I always like to talk about Jimmy Breslin. Jimmy Breslin was somebody that was a big influence in my house. My mother is she shares this love of the maybe my love of writing was partially instilled by her, because we were a newspaper house. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference between people who grow up in a newspaper house and people who don't. And if you grow up in a newspaper house, then it just gets read differently and admired differently. And Jimmy Breslin was always a favorite. He was with New York Newsday for quite a while, and yeah, he was a columnist, but he did it differently. Kind of like Murray Kempton, who was another that was an early favorite. Jimmy Breslin just had the language of the streets down, and just had a really accessible style, I thought. And something that not to you got to develop your own style, but the way that he captured New York in his writing, it was something that I always admired. So to give you a couple, I would say Richard Ben Kramer and Jimmy Breslin were two early biggies for me.
Are there? Where do you stand on rereading stuff? Some people tend to not reread anything, whether it be books or magazine pieces, because there's just so much out there. And then there's another camp, and this is kind of where I am. I figure if there's something that I really, really like Michael Paternitti's One Fall of 111 Heavy, I read that over and over again over the course of a year because it's that good, and you always get something more out of it. So I'm a rereader of really good stuff, especially novels. I read Great Gatsby every year. Where do you stand on rereading stuff that you truly admire and draw inspiration from, or do you constantly seek out new stuff and seek your inspiration in that way too?
I don't read enough. I'm totally with you on the rereading thing. I'm totally with you. I just, and I think it's part of my formula as a writer too is just obsession. When I get when I really get an idea, a song, a book, a piece fixed in my head, I can't get it out. I've got to read it again immediately. I've got to listen to the song again. If there's a song that comes out on the radio that I like, I'll listen to it 100 times on a loop. And I just get very obsessive about things like that, and yeah, books are no exception. Or any piece of writing is no exception. I will reread and yes, get something different and focus on different parts and break them down and analyze them. Maybe read them differently, especially now and the last few years for me, reading things that I loved in my youth and my formative years, reading them more technically now. So yeah, all of that stuff is definitely part of it for me. I do love to reread, so I'm kind of with you on that. And there's there are so many things out there, so so many things that you'd consider classics or must reads for a person that I've just never gotten to, and I make no apologies for that. That's just kind of the way I've done it, and there's never enough time to get to all the stuff out there, but I like what I've got as a collection.
Now you cited the Richard Ben Kramer piece. What do you think of Ted Williams now? What are some of the other maybe 2 or 3 pieces that you do go back to and you read with that magnifying glass and the X-ray vision to see how they did it, and then apply that to your work?
To go outside of the sports realm for a second, I would I would isolate Mark Singer of the New Yorker. I wrote a story of, it must have been 25 years ago now, on Ricky Jay, the magician and character actor who you might have seen if you've ever seen any David Mamet movie. He's the short guy with the beard. Mm-hmm. Who's been known to turn up in David Mamet movies, and he's this wonderful magician, and Singer really, over the course of about 15,000 words, brings him to life in such a unique, vivid way. It was just textbook. It was so expertly sketched, and there was no single part of that story that was just special. You wouldn't say, it was an A- kind of lead. He wasn't doing a magic trick and he wows everybody, but it just draws you in. The story just draws you in little by little. And at the end, you have this perfect, complete portrait of this very fascinating individual. And I just really admired the way that was done. And it's really just to me, about as perfect of a piece of writing, structurally and everything from beginning to end that I can think of. I mean, so that would be one. Maybe. I hate to. I was trying to give that one because I want to stay away from the obvious ones like Frank Sinatra Had a Cold, and I don't necessarily. I want to think outside the box a little here. I'll bring up another Talese piece. His profile of Joe DiMaggio.
Yeah.
That's another in my in my must read in my fave 5. Is that still a thing? That fave 5, is that probably not, but that's another must read for me.
Yeah.
I just it's just a very, very difficult subject, obviously, in the surly DiMaggio, and Talese, really pinned him down without pinning him down, and he had no cooperation really from DiMaggio, and still made it all work and pulled it through the keyhole, and just really, really beautiful stuff.
Yeah, Talese went out, and I guess DiMaggio was notoriously cheap and hated losing golf balls. So when Talese was following him around and DiMaggio would shank a shot, like Talese would go out and shag his golf balls and bring him back to him, and that kind of engendered some sort of a trust with him that he was going to hang around, as Talese is always wont to say, that what he does is the art of hanging out, and he was just with him, and I picture him in his full three-piece suit pulling golf balls out of a water trap.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm sure that those weren't necessarily the most comfortable surroundings for a man who definitely is very stylish.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'd heard that story, and to get back to the art of hanging out, I mean, I definitely have co-opted that idea. I will tell the subject, hey, you're gonna have to kick me out because I'm gonna be here as long as you let me. I'm going to pick, whether it's in conversation or really more just fly on the wall and picking up natural dialogue, which is my favorite. And just trying to blend into the room a little bit, which is not the easiest thing for me, being at 6'2", 250 pounds. It's not it's not exactly. I do tend to stand out a little bit, but I try to just ease out of the scene and just pick up whatever dialogue I can, and that's the stuff I really like to do, and just hang around and wait for the thing to happen, and just get as much as you can. That's I'm a big believer in that, and that Talese story on DiMaggio perfectly does personify that. And that's exactly what he did, and that's exactly why it worked.
Yeah, and another scene in there's two that are really poignant to me. It's about maybe a third of the way through or halfway through, where Marilyn Monroe is recounting her performance with the USO troops and a USO show, and all the soldiers are cheering for her, and she comes back and tells Joe, she's like, "Oh, Joe, you've never heard such cheering." Yep. And he just says, like, "Oh, yeah, yes, I have." And then it just goes into this whole scene of how DiMaggio was getting those and earning those cheers long before Marilyn Monroe, and louder and worshiped more than she ever was.
It's such a small but revealing moment, that. I mean, it really is, because it tells you everything you need to know about DiMaggio. I mean, because even if it's true, and it obviously was with him, it's not the kind of thing you'd say. Most people wouldn't say it, and just the way he said it, so forlornly, you can hear him, in the way that it's presented, you could see like this icy look on his face, and you can hear him say mournfully, kind of, "Yes, I have," and you realize that he's not happy for all of this, for all of this fame and fortune. He's really not at peace. And that all comes out in that moment, and that's the kind of moment, that's the kind of revealing character moment you look to deliver with these profile stories. Is just that kind of thing that just gets to the core of the person, and and think about how simple it was. It's just a 2-line exchange, but you can get all of that as a reader and a writer. You can get all of that out of something so simple.
Right, and then the very end of that too, where he gets into the batting cage, and everyone is watching him, and he takes a couple swings, and he stings his hands on the bat, and he just he drops it. He goes out of the cage, and he's like, "There was a time you could never get me out of that cage," and that's just another line that just reeks of sadness, and that forlornness you're talking about. It's just, that's the hammer to end the story on.
I remember that. I remember him calling for the pitches. Pecker high, middle in. It was perfect. Just the way that whole scene was written, and yeah, it was a perfect story. It really was, and I think so many of those great moments. And yes, Talese is obviously I know his methods have come into some dispute, but boy, the writing is about as good as it gets. I mean, across the board.
Right, and I'm sure we can talk about the greats all day long, but I kind of want to bring it back to your work, obviously, because you've.
Thanks.
Yeah, because your work is.
We've done enough talking about good writing. Yes, let's talk about.
Well. That, of course, that's not what I mean.
I'm messing around, dude. I know. No. Because
your work clearly has been lauded. You were a notable selection for Best American Sports Writing in the last issue, and I'll start there and just ask you what that meant to you to be a notable selection in the most iconic anthology in sports writing.
Oh, dude, it was the coolest thing ever. It really was. I was like, I was walking on air, man. It was I have come I have come to love that book. I always read it. I've come to love it. I've come to develop a very what I consider a close personal friendship with the man who puts it together. Mm-hmm. I just am, and it meant everything to me. I mean, to be there and I felt a real sense of belonging and some validation that I could hack it, to see, to go through, and I don't have to go through all the other names, but all of the creme de la creme of 21st century American sports writing, and then for me to get to my name, I was there's no downplaying that moment for me, I guess is the best way to there's no humble bragging that moment. This is a straight up brag, and a measure of pride for me. I love that my name went in that book, and it does mean the world to me, and just very, very, very cool.
Yeah, and you just alluded to it, that sense of validation, because I think there's so much rejection in what we do. At least I know that's the case with me, and I think it's easy to lose sight of your abilities. Like, you've gotten to a certain point, and your abilities have brought you to this point, but then sometimes you just get bludgeoned to death with rejections. There, you can't land a feature. Your feature gets killed. This, that, and the other, and then you see your name in something like a notable selections, or it's something just resonates with readers and so forth. And what did that sense of validation mean to you? That it must have felt, and I don't want to lead you with this, but I imagine this is how you feel, is that it's giving you the greater permission to keep pursuing what you do and to do it the way you do it.
Yeah, I mean that's it for me. I mean, when to take the ball, and I mean, and yeah, you did kind of lead me a little bit, but it's perfectly cool. I mean, like I said, to pick a ball up and run with it here. I mean, I think what you're hinting at is the harsh financial realities.
Yeah.
Of this profession. And they do exist. I mean, it is a real tough living. For me right now, it's about 2/3 of a living. And I have a part-time job in a school administration office to supplement the writing I'm doing, and yeah, it's tough. And yeah, there are thoughts of quitting and maybe saying that, hey, maybe this can just be a hobby. I'll abandon and do something else. And yeah, just then as soon as one of those moments come along, for me, those crises of confidence, I'll get a citation like that, and yeah, that does help validate a little bit. I can't abandon it. For me, at this point, I don't know what else I'd do. Honestly, I really can't. Apart from radio, obviously, but I really do consider that even though it's not. I mean, even though there are so many differences, it is to me a part of the same general field, and I have a love of radio too. But for me, I really can't see myself. I don't think I'd be happy. In some office 9 to 5 somewhere, and that's tough because I would be happy with a family and a wife and children, and those are things I want too, and those are things that realistically can't happen for me right now because I'm just not in an economic position to make all that happen. But I definitely when something like that in my career does happen, yes, it does give you kind of the permission to go on. And I think at this point for me, I've gotten enough of those enough of that validation from outside sources I've kind of cast my lot at this point.
Have you flirted with getting out of the business altogether? I imagine at this point you might have reached a tipping point where things are pushing in a very positive way for you. But was there ever a point where you thought, like, man, this might just not happen? Many
points. Yeah, and yeah, I don't want to discount the possibility of it even not happening in the future. I mean, it's just so tough out there. It really is. But I spoke to some journalism students a couple of weeks ago at the college where I work, and I told them, you gotta love it. You gotta love it. You gotta love it, or else why are you doing? You're not doing this for the money.
Yeah.
You're just not doing this for the money. And I have come to love it, and so that's why I have to do it. But to answer your question, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is. The landlord does not want to hear that you love your job. I mean, the landlord wants the money at the on the first of the month. So I mean, the landlord couldn't give a damn, about your happiness.
Yeah.
That's where I've stood on that. Is just back and forth trying to just scratch and piece it all together. But yeah, I've certainly entertained thoughts of abandoning or scaling back.
Mm-hmm. And you refer to it. There's kind of like a sliding scale of income right now. Like on the far left, let's say, is just a full, sort of salaried type hourly job, and then on the other side is the freelancing, and then that slowly starts to swing to one way, and it's always a balance. And yours is inching closer to where your business is. It's creeping towards more freelancing all the time. When you were more to the left, where you were supplementing, where it might have been just more, you loved it, but more paid hobby, how did you get access to characters and sources to be able to generate stories and then successfully pitch them?
Well, the first connection, I mean, I guess I'll give a career synopsis at this point. I started, as I mentioned, my first communications jobs were in radio, where I was engineering it at a talk radio network up in Connecticut. And then I picked up a second network, the now defunct Air America, progressive political talk network in Manhattan. And I was on my way to a decent promotion, actually, at Air America. It was about 2 weeks from that when the company went under. And that was February of 2010, I believe. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I had a few months where I was just really out of it. and I took that hard. I really did. And when I dusted myself off, I connected with my dear friend Kramer. Mm-hmm. And I had said that I'd wanted to do a podcast for the Saratoga summer 2010 season. And one that I know that is near and dear to your heart.
Yeah.
Obviously. Actually, I beg your pardon. 2009, obviously, was when your book was said. But right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I didn't mean to, confuse them. But.
Well, I know what you meant. Yeah.
Yeah. So we did that, and we worked for Churchill Downs we did a podcast every day, and a couple of days I took over Claire's blog, and she's like, not bad, you should think about, kind of maybe doing some more writing. I'd always thought I had writing ability. In radio, sometimes, you prepare segments, pre-produced segments. I thought that I could write for the ear, and put together these types of montages. We did this segment, Claire and I, that I always liked. These 4-minute NPR style pre-produced segments where I would write the script and Claire would voice it over, and we'd use some natural sound, and they were basically just 750-word pieces, just with the element of natural sound. And I always liked the way those came out. And Claire kind of, after that Saratoga season ended, our relationship with Churchill Downs had come to an end. But Claire helped set me up and get me some other opportunities. I've met Brian Zipsey, who just took over as managing editor of the Horse Racing Nation website, and that was a fun platform, and so one thing led to the next, and for racing, you can get, because of the sport's diminished mainstream popularity, you can get closer to the stars than you could in another sport. Racing was a great sport for access. So that was how I got early access. Was just covering a niche sport. And then one connection leads to another, and then then I landed an ESPN byline, and then I hustled and landed bylines in some smaller papers, and then eventually a couple of New York Times bylines, and then the big break in my career actually wasn't the Times, but it was with Glenn over at SB Nation, and I had pitched him an unrelated. I pitched him a horse racing story that, for a variety of reasons, he felt he couldn't go with. But he said he liked the way I was thinking and going about it, and he liked the way I was putting it together, and I took the opportunity. He had emailed me back. I'd given up on it, and he emailed me back and said, you should think about shopping this story. Maybe somebody else would take it. And I said, well, no, I'm kind of off that now. But I did have this other idea, and that eventually led to the Mike Francesa profile, the sports broadcaster in New York, a notoriously tough to land interview. And through a variety of luck and persistence, we were able to get that access and go from there. But really quickly on this question before we move on, because I want to bring up one piece I did. For somebody who's just starting out and is worried about access to getting certain subjects. A piece that I point to in my in more recent career that I'm proud of, where I have limited access, was my profile of Michelle Wee for the Sports on Earth website. We really didn't have any special access for that. I just had, the only thing that I had that other people didn't was a 10-minute quickie phone conversation. But really all it was, this was a piece that could have easily been done by just a spectator at that tournament. And being out there, there was nobody, when I started to talk about hanging around, I got there on a 95-degree day in South Jersey, in the tournament there. She was playing in the Pro-Am with 4 amateurs, and I was out there when she teed off at 7 a.m., and I was the only one there. You had perfect sight lines. You were able to pick up dialogue perfectly. So you can find it. The stories are out there. You didn't need a credential for that. You didn't need you didn't need to, any special access. So you can get those kinds of stories if you just know where to look and know how to go about them. So I recommend niche subjects, smaller sports. If sports writing is your thing, you're not going to get that close to an NBA superstar. You're just not, or an NFL superstar. It's not going to happen. But just pick your spots. It's out there.
And what I've always admired about your work, too, you've always found like a really strong central character. And that, whether that be Francesa or Gary Stevens, you name it, like you really get to they're the sun that the whole world, that everything orbits around. And big personalities, too. And I point to Francesa. What was that like, interviewing someone who interviews for a living and is such a big personality? Was that intimidating at all? And just kind of describe what that was like, sitting down and speaking with someone who's such a New York icon.
Wasn't intimidating. Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. He's not the most welcoming sort. He takes time to feel you out, and I chronicle this in the story. He suffers no fools, and you get that impression from the very second that, you get that impression from listening to his program, where he'll dismiss his callers in a matter of seconds, oftentimes, as soon as they make a point that he's not on board with, or deliver it in a less than compelling manner. So the man suffers no fools, and you feel that. I'm sitting across from him in his office, and yeah, there he is. And now at this point, the first time I met him, and the first time I went up to his office, and I was up there 3 times, but by the first time I had spent several months trying to arrange it. So we had a number of off-the-record phone conversations at this point, and those were very instructive, and those did help make things a bit easier for me. I had a vague idea of what to expect, having had all this phone time with him. It really did, even though all the stuff was off the record, it did inform my reporting, and it helped get me comfortable to where I was, because it was the first major assignment of my career. It did help get me comfortable to kind of to sit across from a very intimidating guy who did not look at me really at all for the first 15 minutes of our chat, and as I write, it wasn't out of disrespect. It was just his method. He was testing me out, and I kind of had an inkling to be prepared for that, and was able to make it work as a result. But I want to go back real quick to something you brought up at the beginning of that question, which, actually Glenn and I were talking about this just the other day, was that for many writers, they have certain subjects that they're passionate about, that they're drawn to, and oftentimes they have a common thread. And for me, I think I've come to, in my self-analysis, learn that I'm compelled to write about power and about powerful figures, and what makes them that way. Why do they want that? Do they want that? What does it take to be that? I think a fundamental question that I wrestle with when writing about powerful people is, can they be truly happy? I go back and forth on that one, kind of, and I think that central themes, do emerge, in the types of stories that I've pitched and selected. I'm just really drawn to, these powerful figures. And I just want to know. Go beyond obviously the simple what makes them tick. But I'm just fascinated by the idea of power, and that's something I keep coming back to.
And you've worked with Glenn Stout a bunch of times, and he's just a great voice and champion of long form and narrative journalism. What was it like to be really edited by someone with a scalpel that he possesses?
It was a whole new world, and I've been fortunate. I hear about bad editors. I swear I've never had a bad editing experience. So I don't dismiss the craft at all. And with him, it was a whole new world. It really was, just such detailed line-by-line comments, breaking down every word, learning that every word counts, every single word, and you wouldn't think that, or at least I didn't think that, in a 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 word story, that every word matters and every word counts. It does. It really does, because people have really short attention spans these days.
It may matter more in a longer piece that every word has to count to keep the momentum sustained for that duration. Totally,
and to learn that lesson was incredibly instructive for me. It was crucial for me, because I was wasting, and still do, in early drafts, waste words, and I recognize their importance now, and I can't. I mean, it's night and day. Just how much better that I've gotten since I've worked with Glenn. I mean, I've learning about even things like character arc and just how to, I kind of almost think of all these longer stories sometimes as existing in 3 acts.
Yeah.
An early edit on the Francesa story. We decided to break. Even though there are 5 sections in the story, he wanted me to think of it as a 3-act kind of play. I guess I could say. At the beginning, we have the Francesa Luddite. Which is how many have over the years perceived him in mainstream circles, in stories that have been written about him. That's a common portrayal. Then you have the kind of middle where maybe the evolution. We present the questions: is he a Luddite? And then ultimately the conclusion: no, he's far more shrewd than he'd ever let on, and we went about it in that way. We have an arc, we have a person, a transformation that happens over the course of 7,500 words, and so many things like that. It's too many to list. Things that I consider second nature now, that I would have never occurred to me 2 years ago. 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, I first met Glenn. That stuff has been invaluable to me, and great editors are worth their weight in gold. I mean, you get one, hang on to them, because they make it better. I mean, I can't even read anything I wrote before I ever met that guy now. I can't. It's painful. I mean, and especially to go back to the little Commodore printer. I mean, God forbid. But the experience of working with him has just been has it's completely made me as a writer.
Do you feel like after working with someone like Glenn that your criteria, or let's just say your criteria for what you think is a good feature, or your bar or threshold to proceed with the story, has changed now? Like you have a better sense of what elements make for a good narrative? Instinctively, I think I do. I think I kind of have that feel now. I think that was something that I had a little bit of before. I reference my obsession with certain things. I kind of just that was probably the strongest part of my pre-Glenn game, if you will, was having an intuition and instinct for what makes a good story, and I'm just drawn to certain things, and I can't always explain it, but I think it is just instinct, and I mean, Glenn has certainly fine-tuned that, for specifically from a craft standpoint, but I just do believe that I have kind of that sixth sense of what makes for a compelling subject. And have you ever had a real formative experience with a writer that you admire? You know, someone you always looked up to, and then you met them, and you're just, well, you're like, wow, that was a really cool experience.
A writer that, well, it wasn't, I mean, I have, really, I've been lucky, I mean, to have met the people that I have. I mean, it wasn't much of a meeting, but one that jumps out as you ask that question is the late Paul Moran, over at who was with, I believe...
I sat behind him for 2 years at Saratoga.
Yeah, by that old that old microwave on that last row. Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh no, you were probably above, suspended above him, but I was behind him. If you walk down the stairs, there was some little toaster oven and microwave, and yeah, that's where I sat because I was too uncomfortable to approach the guy who ran the press box for a real seat. So I just plopped my gear down there.
Yeah.
And Paul ran past. Claire introduced me to Paul Moran, and I went totally fanboy. And I love your work, and he kind of laughed, and he was like, okay.
Like, all right.
And that was a transformative experience, as simple as it was, because it made me realize, hey, he's just another guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's just another guy, you know, and I'm just another guy, and you know, we're all working stiffs. I mean, you know, we get to do cool stuff and see cool stuff and be around cool people sometimes, but we're all working stiffs in this racket. I mean, there's no question about that. And that was very instructive for me. It helped me. You know, that was my first time in a press box, in a sports press box. Summer of 2010, and that was really instructive for me, as simple as that was. You know, that Paul Moran, this writer who I had read for so many years and whose work I admired, was just another dude, you know, and that did, as strange as it seems, that encounter did make a big difference for me.
The level of his intelligence just was so humbling. I would read a piece from him, and I would just have to like curl up in a ball and sit in a corner, just knowing that you would never ever reach the level of clarity and intelligence that he seemed to do on deadline pressure. It was just amazing.
Oh yeah, no, just tremendous work, and you know, really somebody who just captured the racetrack very vividly. You know, somebody, you know, kind of had that Jimmy Breslin-esque quality of bringing a place to life, and that was something that he was an expert at. Yes, incredible depth of knowledge, incredibly generous man, a nice man. You know, it's a very different place without him. I mean, you know, he is certainly missed by many. There's no question.
Now, if you were at a fantasy league, fantasy draft for writers, what round would you draft Moran in?
All time?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I mean, it has nothing to do with the quality of his work, but I think if you're including every writer, you know, if we're limiting it to racing, you know, he'd be, you know, if we were limiting it to sports, he'd be pretty high up there. If we were limiting it to racing, he'd be very high up there.
Well, he'd be a great value pick.
I suppose. I mean, I don't know if any such leagues cropped up that I don't know about, because I am I am curious to know that. But yeah, I think that a great value pick does sum him up a little bit, because yeah, he's somebody, yeah, whose knowledge kind of does sneak up on you, very, very self-effacing and humble and nice, and you know, and then you read his stuff and it's very, very good. But yeah, I guess maybe a seventh round sleeper. I don't know. Shoot, I mean, you know, I haven't a clue.
Yeah. And before I let you get out of here, I wanna ask you, you know, if you had you know, five on the low end, 10 on the high end, you had to whittle down your book collection to either 5 or 10 books because it was all you could keep. It's called, you can call it a bookshelf for the apocalypse, if you will. You know, you need to keep something anchored to a world that was that existed before global pandemic, but you've got these 5 to 10 books. What would they be, and why would you hang on to them, and why would they be so formative for you?
So my desert island books or apocalyptic books or whatever. Okay, all right. Let's go with let's keep it down a little bit. I don't want to.
I think 5's a good number.
5 will suffice for me. And I don't want to. I mean, I could say Catcher in the Rye, but something like that. Just I want to think outside the box a little bit here. Like I say.
Yeah.
I guess I'll start with the complete. Well, it's cheating a little bit, but I'll start with the complete works of Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. I'm a big Shakespeare buff. I think just the sound and rhythm of Shakespeare's writing, coupled with his innate understanding of people. I don't think there's anybody, fiction or nonfiction, that has ever understood people as well as Shakespeare. I think that reading those plays, they're very instructive. I think you learn an awful lot about human nature and the human psyche reading Shakespeare, and so I would start with that. I mean, what really as great a dramatist as has ever been. So I'll start with that. I think outside the box, a little more recent than that. I mentioned Mark Singer earlier. That Ricky Jay story was part of an anthology of his called Talk Stories. Mm-hmm. That I loved. It was one of a number of pieces, profiles of Character Studies was the name of the book. My apologies. Character Studies. Okay. Was the name of the collection, and in it he wrote. He wrote, he profiled Martin Scorsese, Donald Trump, and not just those, there's a few under the radar people as well. I wrote about a guy who watches court cases. He goes to that's his, every day. This guy sat in the back of a courthouse, and it became like a professional juror. And Singer made him this unique, fascinating character, so I would include that one. I think trying to mix it up on genres here too. I think I'd point out. I would say Angela's Ashes is about as well as memoir has ever been done for me. As good of a memoir as I've ever read. Just capturing the talk about writing about places and just the dreariness of mid 20th century Ireland. Yeah. Just captured so well by Frank McCourt in that story, and some of the desperate lengths he went to survive, and really just a great piece of craft and a wonderful memoir. That's a must for me on a short list. The best American sports writing of the century, I think, would be on there too. We talked about a couple of pieces in there already. That Gay Talese DiMaggio story, and Richard Ben Kramer and Ted Williams, and a number of others. And what I like about that book is not only do you get definitive portraits of so many of the great athletes of the age, but of the 20th century, but really it's an instructive book in terms of learning about American culture and society during that period, and our evolution as a nation. I think is pretty well chronicled in there. From DiMaggio to Muhammad Ali to Tiger Woods, I think that's all captured very well in there. So that would be another. And fifth one for me, I've talked a lot about Joe DiMaggio already, so I'm hesitant, and Richard Ben Kramer, so I'm hesitant to put that one in there, even though Joe DiMaggio, A Hero's Life, Richard Ben Kramer's biography of DiMaggio is as good as it gets for me. So I guess I will throw that in to talk about it here at this point. I just love the way that was, and a lot of parentheticals in that book. You can't go a single page in that book without multiple parentheticals being used, and just a very unique style from Ben Kramer, but just employed masterfully in that book. He finished off the work that Talese started on the DiMaggio front. Mm. And I want to give you one more here. I'm looking at my bookshelf actually as we speak, and I'll include Billy Bathgate by Yale Doctorow. About the Depression era gangsters, mm-hmm. and a young boy who's trying to join their ranks and as a protege of one of the more influential gangsters, and just a great, that story does for me, I think, what Gatsby does for you. Mm-hmm. Talking to kind of captures that era, and just a beautiful story from beginning to end. So I'll give you those 6.
Cool.
As my what do you call it, bookshelf of the apocalypse?
Yeah.
Is this happening? Is this something I don't know? I mean, do we need to to pack them up here? Or?
you got to be ready at a moment's notice for these things. Well, where can people find you on the internets?
I tweet at Joe_DePaulo, DePaolo. Keep an eye out for I've got some stuff coming up. I'm in a I've been radio silent for a while, but I'll be around here these next few weeks. I've got some stuff coming out. We've got this Klitschko story for the Times coming up. I'll be all over that fight. I'll be working the Mayweather Pacquiao fight for the Washington Post. Mm-hmm. Which I'm very excited about. It is the fight of the century, as it were, and just a very unique event. I've been to a derby. I've been fortunate enough to cover a derby, 2012, but I think this will, fairly easily top that in terms of the uniqueness of the gravity of this event will be greater than your average Kentucky Derby. I think it will be the biggest. I think it is the biggest sporting event that I've covered to date, and it'll be an incredible privilege to be there. And I've got a nice story coming out in Charlotte Magazine also in a couple of weeks. One of our SB Nation crew, Michael Graff, who did some tremendous work for the early part of the SB Nation's long-form program in its infancy. He's the executive editor at Charlotte Magazine, and so I've kind of become pen pals with him a little bit, and I reached out to him about doing a story about an actress who is named Jen Lyon, who is in the new Larry David play, the hot play on Broadway, Fish in the Dark.
Yeah,
and she was a really interesting subject, and that was a story that kind of snuck up on me. If I'm being honest, it was something that I didn't necessarily expect too much of when I started it out, and it evolved into kind of a story that I'm pretty proud of and looking forward to folks reading. So that'll be around, I think, the first couple of weeks of May. That'll be on the interwebs on Charlotte Magazine's website, and I'll be tweeting out the link at my Twitter account. So lots of good stuff coming up, and I very much hope you get a chance to check out any or all of it. I'd be greatly appreciative if you do. And you said it, Brendan. I mean, like, reading's a really big investment. I mean, there's too much stuff out there. And not enough time in the day, so I don't take it for granted ever that anybody would read anything I wrote, and I am always greatly appreciative of anybody who picks up something of mine.
Well, I'll be one of the first in line for sure when all your new work comes out. So I look forward to it greatly, and continued success and best of luck, Joe. I'm sure we'll be in touch in the coming weeks and months.
Absolutely, brother. I had fun. Thanks for inviting me on, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Absolutely. We'll definitely have a part 2. Take care, Joe.
All right, man. Take care.
You too. Thanks once again for listening to the #CNF podcast, episode 10. If you get a chance, head over to BrendanO'Mara.com, throw down your email. That way you get once weekly email blast with things that are new to the website. So links to the podcast, blog posts, and links to other work that I admire, either my own or someone else's. If you get a chance to subscribe to this bad boy on iTunes, it would be a big help if you're a practitioner or a fan of creative nonfiction. That's about it. You can find me on Twitter at Brendan O'Mara, and on Instagram, Brendan O'Mara. And that's about it. So thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for next week.